We start this morning with the Vice President. Joe Biden kind of done it again while trying to put the blame squarely on the shoulders of President George W. Bush for the nuclear buildup in Iran. He blamed the United States. Listen.
When we took office, let me remind you, there was virtually no international pressure on Iran. We were the problem. We were diplomatically isolated in the world, in the region. By going the extra diplomatic mile, presenting Iran with a clear choice, we demonstrated to the region and to the world that Iran is the problem, not the United States.
The Romney campaign quickly fired back with this statement that comes from Policy Director Lanhee Chen. All too often, President Obama and his administration have sought to blame America first, yet Vice President Biden's reckless statement today, blaming America for, of all things, the progress of Iran's nuclear weapons program, has reached a new low. Republican Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming is the chairman of the Republican Policy Committee. He's also a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Joins us this morning. Nice to see you, sir. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me, Sullivan.
It's always my pleasure. Thank you. Let's get your reaction first, what you heard from Joe Biden. I know you have been angered before by things that he has said. What do you think this time around?
Well, I think that the vice president ought to stop blaming America, ought to stop apologizing for America, and ought to focus at where the problem really lies, which is with Iran. These are people who terrorize, their leadership terrorizes their own citizens, threatens their neighbors, and continues to be troublemakers in the world. That's where the problem lies.
You know, we were earlier talking about a number of the gaffes, the blunders, whatever word you want to use to describe sort of what Joe Biden occasionally does. And I want to play a sort of a montage of some of them and then ask you a question on the other side. So let's start with that.
Every 10 minutes there's a shift in sort of what the strategy is. Again,
who gives a Stand up, Chuck. Let him see you.
God rest her soul. And although wait, your mom's still alive as your dad passed. God bless her soul.
How much of this, sir, is this sort of political game? Someone says something, you leverage off of it because it sort of makes its way through the cable talking points conversation. And how much of this is genuinely you feel the conversation and what he said about Iran is destructive and somehow hurts an international conversation?
Well, Joe Biden here seems to be the gift that keeps on giving when you listen to a number of his comments. But, you know, I served on the Foreign Relations Committee both with the president as well as with Vice President Biden. I don't know if he has selective amnesia, but in the last 2 years of the Bush administration, there were 5 different sanctions against Iran. And what's happened now in the last 3 years, and even the president's old national intelligence director has said that things have continued to move in Iran with development of nuclear weapons. We see that, and if anything, it's actually the stubborn reality is that what Iran is doing is accelerating. So things are not getting better there. We see the sanctions that the Senate tried to offer. The president and vice president fought those when it was obvious that we were going to get things passed to make it tougher on Iran. Then the White House tried to weaken those sanctions. We have great concerns about Iran with a nuclear weapon, and even one nuclear weapon is too much in the hands of this destructive regime.
Senator, at no point did he say allow them to have a nuclear weapon. What he was saying is very simply, we should have been maximizing international pressure under the Bush administration. So let's deal with what he said. Forget if we want to call it a gaffe or not. Is that true or not in terms of American leading an international effort to put pressure on Iran?
This, to me, is an administration which is soft on tough dictators and tough on soft dictators. And what we see is an administration that stood silent when there were protesters rising up in the streets of Iran during this president's administration. Well, I said initially that there are 5 different sanctions brought between 2006 and 2008 with the United Nations against Iran. So maybe the vice president has selective amnesia on those points. But those were things that have continued to go. And what we know now is that Iran is not slowing down. We know that Iran seems to be, at least in my opinion, trying to just run out the clock as they try to develop this so-called zone of immunity where they have the enriched nuclear material. For a nuclear weapon, you need about 140 pounds of uranium and ways to enrich it to 80%. And my concern is that they're going to get there sooner rather than later. They are accelerating their efforts to do that. And what this administration is doing has not been able to stop that.
I just want to underline something Senator Barrasso said, because he answered your question, Roland, before you asked it. Set aside whether or not Vice President Biden's comments are offensive on their own merit. They're just simply wrong. Iran has continued to move towards a nuclear program and, in fact, has accelerated it. So if we were the problem, which is offensive, but more importantly wrong, what have they done right? This administration.
First of all,
if the program has continued.
First of all, you're asking him, or you're asking me?
I think I'm asking you.
He's asking you, and you can turn and ask the
Yes, Senator. First, I think what Vice President Biden was talking about, when you look at Iran's partners, you talk about Russia, when you talk about the impact they could have on the country, when you begin to talk about China as well, when you begin to talk about France, I believe what it was saying is us talking to those individuals and saying, look, we need you to also put pressure on your partner of Iran, just like we're talking about North Korea talking to China as well.
But it does look like Iran, rather than bucking under and the sanctions and buckling under, they're saying, no, we're going to go to India. We learned that just in the last couple of days. They're working to work their way around the sanctions through relationship with India. The Secretary of State has even said that that Iran, working with China, is attempting to break through the sanctions. So Iran is not, in my opinion, being impacted significantly to the point that they are going to listen to world opinion and stop their efforts to develop nuclear weapons. But the reality is they're going to continue to work in an aggressive nature toward that, and it seems to me to be accelerating, not slowing down.
Senator John Barrasso, MD, he's the chairman of the Republican Policy Committee. Thank you for talking with us this morning. Certainly appreciate it.
Thank you, Soledad. Thank you.